Hello, we are Group 10 and our project is titled Analysis of Hawkeye Replacement Policy. It is based on a paper called Back to the Future Leveraging Belledy's Algorithm for Improved Cache Replacement, which was presented in ISCA 2016. Cache replacement policies for the last level caches are the focus of our project. In 1966, Robert Belledy proposed the optimal cache replacement policy. This policy says that the ideal block for eviction is one which will be referenced furthest in the future. Several studies in the recent past have concluded that the most popular cache replacement policy for LLCs, the LRU policy, leaves significant room for improvement in miss rate as compared to OPT. Let us now have a look at the different types of cache access patterns. The first one is the recency-friendly access patterns. This is characterized by high temporal locality of the access blocks, and this is one of the access patterns for which LRU shines. The second type of access pattern is the thrashing access pattern. These are the patterns for which the working set of the program is greater than the size of the cache. The third access pattern is a scanning access pattern. This is characterized by absolutely no temporal locality, which means that there is no replacement policy which performs well. The most common access pattern is a mixed access pattern, which is a mix of two or more of the above mentioned access patterns. Let us now speak about the problems with LRU. First problem is the way LRU handles thrashing access patterns. To illustrate this, let us consider a simple example of a four-way set associative cache with 5 blocks A, B, C, D, E mapping to the same cache set. For the given access pattern, when E is accessed, A is evicted. When A is accessed, B is evicted, and so on. Thus, LRU leads to all accesses missing in the cache. To overcome this, the dual insertion policy DIP was proposed. DIP is an adaptive policy that continuously monitors the performance of two replacement policies which run on dedicated sets in the cache. It then chooses the winning policy which will be applied to all the other sets. One of the replacement policies is the LRU insertion policy. This policy inserts the incoming cache blocks to the LRU position and thus preserves the majority of the working set for thrashing access workloads. The other policy is the generic LRU policy, which favors recency-friendly workloads. Thus, DIP is good for both thrashing and recency-friendly workloads. However, the LRU component of DIP makes DIP perform very badly for scanning access patterns. Both LRU and DIP evict useful cache blocks when scans show up in otherwise recency-friendly access patterns. In this example, the working set ABCD will be removed from the cache in the presence of scans. The SRRIP and DRIP policies, which we will discuss, aim to provide resistance to these scans. A factor that has often been overlooked is the PC-biased caching behavior of blocks. Several studies, including the most recent one by Jain and Lin, have observed that memory blocks accessed by the same PC have very similar caching behavior. On an average, it is seen that the probability that loads by the same PC will have the same caching behavior for OPT is about 90.4%. This can be used to guide cache replacement decisions. SHIP, explained in the upcoming slides, does this. A brief description of our project. We have implemented DRRIP and SHIP policies in addition to Hawkeye to analyze the extra performance gains by employing Hawkeye on the replacement policy for LLC. RRIP. As I have already mentioned, RRIP was developed to provide resistance to scan chains in otherwise recency-friendly access patterns. In RRIP, every block that is brought into the cache is associated with a re-reference prediction value, RRPV number. A lower RRPV number indicates that a block is likely to be re-referenced in the near future, whereas a higher RRPV number indicates that the block is not likely to be referenced again for some time, which according to OPT qualifies it for eviction. There are two RRIP based policies called static RRIP, SRRIP for short, and bimodal RRIP, BRRIP for short. Both SRRIP and BRRIP evict cache blocks with maximum RRPV values. If none of the blocks have the maximum value, then the RRPVs of all the blocks are incremented till a block is evicted. Also, both these policies decrement the RRPV values of blocks on cache hits, thus predicting that there is a higher chance that blocks that receive hits are likely to be referenced again. Where they differ is in the insertion policy. SRRIP assigns an RRPV of maximum RRPV value minus 1 to the incoming cache block. This has the advantage of stopping scan blocks from polluting the cache while also allowing the block to be retained if it receives hits. Unfortunately, this doesn't work well with thrashing workloads, where all blocks are accessed equally. To rectify this, BRRIP frequently inserts blocks with a distant re-reference value of maximum RRPV, thus retaining at least a part of the working set for thrashing workloads, while infrequently inserting blocks with far re-reference prediction. to favor recency-friendly access patterns. DRRIP is an adaptive policy which chooses the better performing of SRRIP and BRRIP as the main replacement policy for all the sets. Thus, GRRIP provides both scan resistance and trash resistance.
So as Ashwin previously discussed in the slides, that there are several drawbacks of DRRIP, which is why we introduced SHIP in the current slide. So what is SHIP? SHIP is basically a signature-based hit predictor. And the main focus of SHIP is to learn the behavior of re-references across different cache accesses and then use it to predict the re-reference intervals of all future cache accesses. We need a 1-bit outcome corresponding to each cache line, and that will denote whether the cache line was re-referenced after its insertion. We also need a 16K entry table, which is known as the signature history counter table, whose each entry will be a 3-bit counter. The SHCT is used to learn the re-reference behavior of the accesses. The most important characteristic of SHIP is the signature, which can be both PC-based and memory-based. In PC-based, we use the top 14 bits of the program counter, and in memory-based, we use the top 14 bits of the memory address being accessed to index into the SHCT. Now, there are two different parts of SHIP. The first is to learn the re-reference behavior by training the SHCT. The SHCT is trained based on every cache access. So let's say there is a cache hit, we increment the SHCT corresponding to that signature. Else, if it's a miss, we look for the outcome bit of the evicted line. So let's say the outcome bit is 1, then we increment the SHCT, else we decrement the SHCT. The next part of SHIP is to predict the re-reference intervals using SHCT for next cache accesses. So let's say there is a cache miss. We look at the SHCT entry corresponding to that signature. If it's a 0, we predict a distant re-reference. Else, we predict an intermediate re-reference. And that re-reference prediction is then fed to the next replacement policy. So let's say we have a LRU as the base policy, and we predict a distant re-reference. Then we insert the new incoming block at the end of the LRU chain. And if it's an intermediate re-reference, we insert in the middle of the LRU chain. If we use SRRIP as our base replacement policy, we set the re-reference predictor value to be a SOC -1 or a SOC -3 for distant and intermediate re-reference respectively. A SOC is the set associativity of the cache. In the next section, Venki will be introducing the concept of Hawkeye.
Hawkeye is a recent cache replacement policy introduced by Jain and Lin in ISCA 2016 earlier this year. The key idea behind Hawkeye is that we can view cache replacement as a binary classification problem. We are merely required to classify incoming lines as either cache-friendly or cache-averse. Cache-friendly lines are inserted with high priority, while cache-averse lines are either bypassed completely or inserted with low priority. In other words, cache-averse lines are ideal candidates for future eviction. An important assumption of Hawkeye is that the past is a brilliant indicator of the future. That is, if a load instruction has resulted in hits in the past, it is quite likely to lead to more hits in the future. Consider this simple example as shown here. The current instruction is indicated by this arrow, which is basically a load access to memory block B. If the previous execution of this load instruction has resulted in a cache hit, we predict that cache block B is cache friendly. However, if instruction 2 resulted in a cache miss, we predict that cache block B, like cache block A, is also cache averse. Therefore, we apply Beledi's OPT algorithm to train our predictor based on past behavior. The predictor guides current, insertion, and eviction decisions. The two key components of Hawkeye are the OPT gen block and the Hawkeye predictor. The OPT gen block is used to store a fixed history of past accesses. It simulates and recreates Beledi's algorithm for these past accesses. It is used to train the Hawkeye predictor based on a simple output, OPT hit or OPT miss. This indicates if the current cache access is a hit or a miss under Beledi's algorithm. The Hawkeye predictor is a simple lookup table to indicate if the access is cache friendly or cache averse. Additionally, each cache line has an RRIP value. A value of 7 indicates that it is cache averse, while a value between 0 and 6 indicates cache friendly behavior. A higher RRIP value indicates an older cache friendly line. Now let us look at the OPT gen block in a little more detail. The OPT gen block cleverly recreates Bellidy's algorithm with limited hardware overhead. It essentially consists of an occupancy vector in every cache set. This indicates the number of active lines within that set. It also consists of a sampled cache, which is used to track past accesses. The authors introduced two important parameters, namely usage interval and liveness interval. Usage interval is the time period between two concurrent accesses to the same memory block. Liveness interval indicates the amount of time for which the line is active within the cache. Now let us consider a simple example to understand this concept. Important assumptions within this example are that we support bypassing and also that the cache capacity is limited to two-way. Here we indicate the memory blocks that are accessed at different times, and here we show the state of the occupancy vector. For every memory access, we enter a value 0 for the last element of the occupancy vector. Here at time t equals 2, we notice that there is a re-reference to block B. The shaded region is the usage interval of block B. We look at all the elements within the usage interval and check that they are less than the cache's capacity. If they are, we conclude that the memory block is a hit and we increment all elements within the occupancy vector and the usage interval. This happens for memory block A and memory block B. However, for the re-reference of memory block E, we notice that the occupancy vector already has an element which is equal to the cache capacity. Therefore, we conclude that E is a miss and we do not increment any element's value within the usage interval. The second critical component is the Hawkeye predictor. This is effectively a simple lookup table indexed by the hashed PC value. Each entry within the predictor is a 3-bit counter. A value between 0 and 3 indicates cache averse behavior, while a value between 4 and 7 indicates cache friendly behavior. There are essentially two stages of operation. One is prediction and the other is training. Within prediction, we simply feed the current PC value and predict if the access is cache friendly or cache averse. Within training, we use the output of OPT gen to train the last PC value either positively or negatively. Let us look at the previous example. Consider the current instruction to be instruction 2. If instruction 2 resulted in a cache miss for block A, we would train the PC value of 100 positively. However, if it resulted in a cache miss, we would train the PC value of 100 negatively. Also important to note that we perform prediction before training. Another key point to note is that while SIP learns behavior based on its own policy, Hawkeye learns behavior from Bellidy's OPT algorithm. Every cache replacement policy has 4 key functions: access a block, insert a block, evict a block, and invalidate a block. The Hawkeye cache replacement policy does not lead to any changes in the invalidate function. However, upon access or insertion, there are 4 possibilities which are indicated within this table. If the prediction is cache averse, we insert the block with an RRIP value of 7. However, if it is a cache hit and the prediction is cache friendly, we insert an RRIP value of 0. We do the same thing for a cache miss, but additionally, we age all the other cache friendly lines. That is, if the RRIP value is less than 6, we increment the value by 1. So here we notice that all cache averse lines have an RRIP value of 7, while cache friendly lines have a value between 0 and 6. After prediction, we train the Hawkeye predictor. Within the find victim function, we first give priority to cache averse lines. However, if in the absence of cache averse lines, we evict the cache friendly line with the highest RRIP value. Additionally, if a cache-friendly line is evicted, we train the last PC negatively. The main objective of our project is to analyze the performance benefit of the Hawkeye policy. Jain and Lin have studied performance on the CPU 2006 benchmarks. We corroborate their findings and extend the analysis to parsec benchmarks. The novel contribution being the analysis of parsec benchmarks. Jain and Lin used two critical concepts to reduce the hardware overhead, namely the concept of time quantum and sampling sets. We do not model these concepts in our implementation as they only lead to a slight degradation in performance. Therefore, our analysis serves as an upper bound of Hawkeye's performance. Additionally, we do not support bypassing within the cache. We use 8K entries within the sampled cache. Each entry consists of a tag, which is 2 bytes, the last PC value, which is another 2 bytes, and the last timestamp value. The Hawkeye predictor also consists of 8K entries and was indexed by the lower 13 bits of the program counter. The occupancy vector had 128 elements in our implementation. Now moving on to the project evaluation. We present our results and conclusions within this section.
Finally, we come to the evaluation methodology which we have used in the project. So we have used Gem5 as our simulation framework, and the baseline configuration can be seen in the table. We have used a 32 kilobyte L1 iCache and Dcache. Each is of 1 cycle latency and 4-way set associativity. L2 cache is 256 kilobyte, 8-way set associative and 10 cycle latency. The last level cache which we modeled in Gem5 is L3 is 2 megabyte and 16-way set associated with 20 cycle latency. The benchmarks which we used in this project are Spec CPU 2006 and Parsec. For Spec, we used a single core machine and the applications were A star, B waves, etc. For Parsec, we used a 4-core machine with an 8 MB last level cache and the applications were BodyTrack, Stream Cluster and Ferret. So we can see the results for Spec benchmarks. So we evaluated our result based on the improvement in MPKI over LRU and improvement in simulation time over LRU, which are analogous to each other based on our observation. So we can see almost a 10% improvement over LRU in case of Cactus for DRRIP and a 15 and 20% improvement for SHIP and Hawkeye respectively. In case of MCF, Hawkeye gives a 10% improvement over LRU in MPKI. In case of ZIS-MP, we can see that although Hawkeye does not perform as good as LRU, it definitely performs much better than SHIP and DRRIP. The main contribution of our project was to evaluate Hawkeye for the Parsec benchmarks, and as we can clearly see that none of the replacement policies including SHIP and DRRIP and Hawkeye perform good for Parsec. So LRU is the best for Parsec benchmarks. One of the possible reasons which was mentioned in one of the papers which was published in International Symposium for Workload Characteristics mentions that for parallel benchmarks, the same cache line has multiple sharers and thus the replacement technique which we use must be sharing aware, which unfortunately is not possessed, that this characteristic is not possessed by any of the algorithms which we evaluated. So in conclusion, we can say that since last level cache gets temporarily filtered accesses from L1 and L2, we need new replacement techniques. We also discussed the different cache access patterns, including the scan-based and thrashing-based, and why it needs to be taken care while deciding the cache replacement policy for our machine. We also saw the results for Spec and Parsec benchmarks, and we concluded that Hawkeye, although seems to provide promising result for Spec benchmark, it performs very poorly for Parsec benchmark. And among all the state-of-the-art techniques which we analyze, there is none which performs well for all kinds of applications, which is one of the reasons why most of the modern chip multiprocessors use LRU as their cache replacement policy.
Finally, a quick look at all the references within our presentation.